On this episode of the Smoke and Barrel Show, we're going to be talking about cigar legend Julio A. Eiroa. So in this episode, we're going to talk about Julio A. Eiroa, who is a cigar legend in the industry. So let's start with a little bit of the history. So I'm here with Kyle, Route 7 Cigars. Kyle, tell me a little bit about Julio A. Eiroa.
Okay, so Julio A. Eiroa was born in Pinar del Rio, Cuba. I can't even say it. What the hell? In 1938. So he's 85 now, and he's still going strong. He left Cuba in 1957. He was wanted by the Batista police. He went to Nicaragua and then to the U.S. When Castro took power. He went back to Cuba until he found out that Castro was a dictator, not a revolutionary, and he went back to Miami.
Okay.
From there, he met up with Angel Oliva from the Oliva tobacco family, not the cigar manufacturer. Angel is a leaf buyer, one of the largest in the U.S., and a tobacco grower. So he gets a job with them, and they send him to Honduras to check out cigars in Don Lee. He goes there and he starts growing tobacco for them, and within a year he leaves them and goes out as an independent grower, which he's been since basically the early 60s.
Okay.
He started buying up land everywhere from the government. He now owns a minimum of 700 acres of tobacco growing farmland. At one time it was up to 1,200 acres.
So, okay. So tell me a little bit about, you know, what got him into the industry? What got him into making cigars, and what kind of cigars?
Well, everybody from Pinar del Rio in Cuba is tobacco. That's all that's grown there. So from the time they're born, they're kind of put into it. So the minute he came to the U.S., he goes looking for people in the cigar business because they're all in Ybor City and Tampa. And that's where the connections are. And like I said, he made connections with Angel.
Right.
And they want to start making cigars in Honduras.
Gotcha.
Because Cuba's gone now. There's an embargo, and they're trying to find places to grow tobacco. He had the wherewithal to know that this was a really good place. If you listen to him talk, because he's on the internet, you can hear him, you know, interview him when they interview him, and he goes, you know, when I got there in 1961, it was a jungle. There weren't roads there weren't anything. It was, basically jungle land. Yeah. So, you know, we had to start this from scratch.
Yeah. So today we're gonna talk about some of his lines, some of his cigars, some of what he produces today. So tell me a little bit about his manufacturing process today. Is it still him? Is it his family?
Yeah.
How does that work?
Julio is the grower. He started a factory in 1985 called Eiroa in Don Lee. And that's what he started doing by producing cigars. There's no names there. He's just producing cigars for like Thompson's or, you know, big companies or whatever, just producing cigars. No specific brand. In 1985, well, his son, Christian, which is Christian Eiroa, graduated from Miami University in 1997 and came back and started a factory with his father. And that's where they started making brands under their own name. Camacho was the first cigar made by that brand, but it was already a brand owned by Simon Camacho, and the family bought it to have a flagship brand for Eiroa, so they took Camacho. They also made Baccarat, which is one of the #1 selling premium cigars on the market today still.
Yes.
Sweetness. And then they made La Fontana, which is named after their executive president of Eiroa, who's dead now, but that's Salvatore Fontana, who was a legend in the cigar business on his own right. Everybody called him Sal. Anyway.
So what makes, I mean, we mentioned this early on, that he's a legend, right? What makes him a legend, and what makes his cigars so popular?
Okay, so he started with direct Corojo seed from Honduras, and that's all he's ever used is that line.
Okay.
That Corojo seed gives the cigar in Honduras, because you can grow it somewhere else and it would be different, a distinct characteristic of almost a minerally taste like Cuban tobacco.
Right.
Not exact. If you smoke the Corojo Reserva, you get very similar characteristics that you would from a Cuban.
And speaking of which, I know we've got some of his cigars out here.
Yeah.
This one right here, this is the Aladino. This is the Corojo Reserve, which is one of my favorite cigars, and it's got that wrapper on it that you're talking about.
It probably has the best tasting wrapper of anything in our humidor, in my opinion. That's just my opinion, but I have very few people after they smoke it say, "Oh, it was okay." Most everybody goes, "Holy, wow, this is really good."
That's a really good cigar, really smooth. It's got a little bit of kick to it, but it's a really good smoke. So tell me a little bit more about some of the cigars that we've picked here to kind of focus on for the show. So there's some other Aladinos here in the line.
Okay, so Julio and Christian owned Camacho, and they sold it to Davidoff in 2008. They sold it to him in 2008. Christian stayed with Camacho with Davidoff. Julio said, I sold the factory to Davidoff because it took up too much of my time and it kept me away from the fields of growing tobacco because that's what I do best, right? So he didn't want to handle the factory part of it. It was just, it took him away from growing his tobacco, and that's what he loves to do. So Christian stayed with Davidoff until his compete clause ended, and the minute that happened, he opened CLE, which is named after him, Christian L. A. Eiroa.
Yep.
Father making the tobacco, son running the factory.
Okay.
It started to kick off. So the cigars he came out with, the original was Asylum, which is a Honduran cigar, Corojo seed, pretty strong, little spice, but mostly an earthy taste.
Right.
It's still selling really, really, really well today. We always carry it in the humidor. And since Christian got into this in 1998, 20 years later, they came out with their anniversary line, and it's done in 4 wrappers, but this is probably the richest cigar they make in the line. It's intense. It's got a lot of flavor. Everybody that smokes it says, wow, man, this is probably one of the fullest cigars we smoked, and it's all Honduran.
It's all Honduran, okay.
Yep, Corojo binder, filler, and a Maduro wrapper.
Okay.
So as soon as Christian opened his factory, Justo, who is the oldest son of Julio, had been in other businesses. He owned a water company. He grew sorghum and other crops on his dad's property. Decided to go in with his dad and start another factory. And they started Aladino in 2016.
Okay.
They originally started with just a line called Eiroa, made of Corojo. And it started to sell. It's still a boutique brand on the market. A lot of stores don't have it, which is fine with me, so come down here and buy it, since you can't find it anywhere else. But when he came out with Corojo Reserva, the Corojo seed itself produces a lot less tobacco per plant than others. So you can only make a certain amount of it. You're not going to be able to make as many as if you were making just a regular line of cigars. It is a lot more limited. I think the first year all they could come up with was 800 boxes.
Right.
But this is the exact blend of the Camacho Diploma that was made before Davidoff bought it. They don't make that cigar. They don't care about that cigar. So Julio took it back, and that's why they came out with it.
Okay.
The next cigar they came out with was the Cameroon that you're smoking now. Its originality, I guess, is it is definitely a Cameroon wrapper, but it's grown in Honduras. It's not Cameroon from Africa. It's grown in Honduras, which will give it a distincter taste than the African because it's picking up the Honduran soil. Okay, Mike, so you've had a chance so far to smoke that Cameroon. What do you think of it?
Yeah, so I'm a big fan of the Cameroon wrapper. I really like this. It fits my palate really well. Obviously, it's all Honduran. But that Cameroon wrapper just has a great taste to it. So yeah, this is a really good cigar, and what's this thing ring out at? It's not super expensive.
$8, $9. You consider it medium full?
I would put it on sort of the medium to full side. It's not super strong. So if you're not a sort of smoker, you're not smoking every day, I still think it's something you can pick up. So.
Right. Okay. So then the next cigar in the line is the Classic, which is the last new one he's come out with.
Yeah.
And the Classic is really, he based it on his original cigars he was making in 1985 when he started his factory. He liked that taste. It's also Corojo. It's probably a little fuller than the Cameroon you're smoking.
Right.
It's closer to a fuller bodied cigar, but it's really, really tasty.
Okay.
I also wanted to bring up the Candela. This is a limited run by Aladino, Candela, that he came out with sometime around St. Patty's Day because it's a green wrapper. It specifically does not go through fermentation like the rest of the tobacco. That's why the leaf looks green.
Right.
The reason I wanted to bring it up, in the 1970s when Julio had all his acreage and was just growing tobacco, he was the largest producer of Candela wrapper in the world.
Yeah, okay.
In that era, man, a lot of people smoked Candela in the United States. It was a very, very popular wrapper.
Okay.
It's lost that popularity. People still like it, but
it does have
either,
a distinct
yeah,
taste.
it's either you like it or
yeah,
you don't
either
like it.
Or you don't. Yeah.
It's almost tea-like in its taste.
Yeah.
So yes, it's a very distinct flavor.
So we talked a little bit about the Aladino. We talked about the Asylum. But for the listeners out there and the watchers out there, I'm walking into my local cigar shop, or maybe I'm shopping online, and I'm interested in smoking something from Julio's line. What am I typically looking for? Am I walking into the cigar shop? Am I asking for a specific brand? Am I saying, hey, give me something by Julio?
Right. Yeah.
How do I get into some of his
Specifically,
cigars?
you probably wouldn't bring up Julio at all. Some of the people probably don't even know, if you go into a shop, that
Right.
Julio is the grower of the tobacco, but
Right.
they know both his sons.
Yeah. So what am I
So you're
asking
asking for CLE, anything by CLE, which is Christian's initials.
Right.
That's the name of his company. It's on all the boxes. Or you're asking for Aladino. They also make Tatatskin, which is a brand by Aladino that has a sweet wrapper like a Baccarat, because they were the originator of Baccarat. Davidoff owns it now, so they came out with a cigar that was similar.
Right.
It's the lowest price cigar in the line, and if you're just starting out or you have somebody you want to buy for that's just starting out, that's the best way to go, because you're getting a sweet tip.
Right.
But you ask for either one of those brands. If they don't carry them in the store, ask them, will they carry them, right? You know, I always like building up, the manufacturers, the growers, into people wanting to buy their cigars, because they're really good.
And I'm sure folks can go out there and find these online as well. So.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. So listen, everybody, I hope that gives you a little bit of background on Julio, why we think he's a cigar legend. These are some of the cigars that we've picked out that we like to smoke. As we mentioned, the Cameroon, really good. I would highly recommend going for it. So thanks a lot for watching us. And don't forget to click like and subscribe down below, and we'd love to hear from you in the comments.